Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Chrono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to do a quick video with you guys, just talking about the things that I would like to see change in PSO2 and kind of get a little bit of a gauge on what you guys think and what you'd like to see. But before we jump into that, if you guys are new here, as always, like I mentioned, I'm Chrono. I primarily cover PSO2 content. Would much appreciate a subscribers okay towards that 10K mark, hopefully, by the end of this year. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. So this is a topic that I talk about casually on stream all the time. I've talked about with friends. We talk about, I've even talked about with my wife Skulls. The conversation of how make game better is a very common thing that happens. But I feel like having a concise or a collective location where we can talk about that might be a little bit better. Now, of course, you can always talk about this stuff in Discord, and people are welcome to disagree with any one opinion versus another. But I wanted to talk about some things that I think would just overall be better for the health of the game, not just things that I specifically want to change. There is a distinction between those two things. If it was just what I want to change, there's not a lot of situations where everyone would be super happy. I come from my bias in content or in games has to do very heavily with action-based gaming or high difficulty-based content. And while I understand that that's super fun for a lot of us here, that is not always going to be the best thing for the health of the game. Some of it is, and it is important to keep in mind. However, it's not going to be the end all be all for the entire game. And a lot of us like to be like, oh, well, everyone wants to do this or everyone wants to do that. Got to keep in mind everyone who's talking wants this and wants that. It's not overall the entire player base. So we got to remember that there is more than just us out there. There are all different types of players. And realistically, for a game to succeed, you have to cater to as many of those players as you can without feeling like you're alienating the rest. So you got to kind of cater around a little bit. Either way, that's kind of my mindset when it goes into these. I want to talk about a few individual topics, starting off with one I feel like is pretty straightforward. It's the item lab. So the item lab isn't completely broken per se, but we do have a problem when it comes to gearing right now in NGS. The way the game itself works, when a new weapon or a unit comes out, there's just a feeling of dread that players have. They have to go through this gearing cycle, and we were so close to fixing that problem with the Augment transfer system. However, the introduction of the EX Augment system has put a bit of a monkey wrench into that situation, so we have a few different problems we need to iron out. First and foremost, the biggest issue that I find in this entire process, which not everyone's going to agree with because it's really not that expensive, but I do think it is overall still a problem, is the cost for everything. We have a meseta cost tied to every single upgrade type in the game. So we're looking at limit breaking, looking at potential unlocking, we're looking at item enhancing. All of it has a meseta cost tied to it, even multi-weaponing. And I'll be honest, the meseta cost is too high. Realistically, the meseta cost is unnecessary. And it's not too high that it's too expensive. It's too high in that it's a basic feature that's necessary for players to upgrade their gear. However, basic playtime doesn't really facilitate that upgrade type. So let me explain a little bit further. If you're someone who's just playing the game casually, you're doing your dailies, your weeklies, things of that sort, and then you see a new weapon show up, right? Well, you're farming you're just playing casually, you're doing your urgent quests and that sort of thing. If you were to go and make a new weapon, upgrade it, unlock it, all that stuff, you're probably going to drain all the meseta that you just made over the course of like maybe a week or so. That's pretty rough. Now, it's not that it's end of the world to ask someone to spend, a week's worth of meseta that they casually farmed up on their weapon is not too difficult of an ask. But our game caters to a very casual player base. You do not need anywhere near the best gear to clear content. And because of this, players have a very easy mindset of why bother spending my money when I can just use what they gave me for free and still get through the same stuff. You have to have an active drive to want to upgrade your gear to even put value in upgrading your gear in the first place. You want to do more damage. You want to be able to clear content faster. You want to be able to farm more efficiently, so on and so forth. And though we can argue every single day of the week that, yeah, the money you put into your gear is actually worth it if you spend wisely, players still aren't going to spend that money if they have to choose between, do I upgrade my gear or do I make my character look cooler? The other half of this game is fashion, and people would argue that it's more the fashion side than it is the gear side. Now, I'm a 50-50 split usually. I put gear, then fashion, and I put gear first to a degree, and then when I'm at a comfortable place, I put fashion very high up on there. You're talking to someone who currently right now is running around with 60 mil worth of dashes, glides, and all that stuff, and then 90 mil worth of camos equipped at the moment. I'm not even joking. If I were to go over to my gear and I look at the item price, these have gone up dramatically since I bought them, and this has also gone back up as well. I went down a little bit, so I lost out on like 4 mil-ish. But either way, if you're looking at the price of these things, I am no stranger when it comes to fashion. Absolutely love it. Super, super awesome. But when you have to ask the player, hey, look, you need to decide, are you going to get gear or are you going to get fashion? And that's the conversation you have to have time and time and time again. If they don't need the gear to get through content, they're going to pick the fashion every single time, especially since fashion is fairly expensive. And it's going to drive them towards that side. They're going to think, oh, well, it's not worth it. On top of that, we have the Augment transfer system now, that because of the EX Augment system, we're now afraid for them to release units with EX Augments. With weapons, it's fine, right? As long as they never get to a point where they're releasing 4 EX Augments on a weapon, as long as it's just 3, we're pretty much comfy. The reason for that, I explained in one of my other videos, but essentially the Augment transfer system would allow us to transfer all our augments from one piece of gear to the next, which was super awesome. However, with EX Augments, you can only transfer or use the EX Augment transfer system if the weapon already has EX Augments, meaning to get EX Augments on a weapon that does not have EX Augments, which you absolutely want, they're very, very powerful, you would need to essentially transfer or do a regular Augment transfer, which if you're only using EX Augments, it doesn't cost a ticket, which is great. However, it transfers over all EX Augments, including the blank slots that are there, overriding all of the augments on your gear. So if you already had an augmented weapon, you essentially are starting from blank on that weapon to get the EX Augments on there, which you absolutely want because they're very powerful, but you are wiping out all of your expensive augments, and there is currently no way to save them to bring them back over onto the weapon after the fact, because transferring them to another weapon and then transferring them back is just going to cause you to overwrite your EX Augments. So you are forced to re-augment your piece of gear. Again, that was kind of quick, but if you're curious of how that works, I explain it in another video. I'll try to remember to link it in the video description or in a pinned comment. But essentially, the Augment transfer system was awesome. The EX transfer system made it kind of a pain. When those were introduced, at the same time as the Augment transfer system, it caused this bit of a problem. Now players are still waiting for them to release new units with the EX Augments on them. And when they do, you're going to have to re-augment all of your units because the same problem still exists. They haven't fixed this issue, which I feel like is a very easy thing to fix. Just allow us to augment or EX Augment transfer over our augments and have them overwrite specific augments instead of overwrite everything. That would be so much better of a system. It's already existed before. We had the same system back in base game. I'm not sure why they made this more complicated than it necessarily needed to be, but it definitely needs to be changed. This is a huge problem, and it only becomes a problem during this interim period, because after the interim period, like let's say we get a new weapon, we can just augment transfer over to it and we're fine. Then we're excited for new weapons again. Then it becomes, can we gather enough resources to have our augment transfers ready when a new weapon comes out? You aren't freaking out over the weapon itself. You're like, all right, cool, I can go ahead and transfer over to this. The problem with this is now with new weapons, creating weapons, upgrading weapons, multi-weaponing things, you're looking at massive amount of Meseta that you're giving away to this. It's just going into the toilet, basically. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to any player. It's just a money sink, essentially, of roughly 2.5 mil and materials. I don't know why we have it being Meseta and materials. Increase the material cost. We have no reason to use those materials. I have tons of materials of all different types because the game gives you tons and tons of materials. You've got tons of these materials and they don't work on anything else. The only thing I can do with them is just fodder them, literally just vendor them. That's it. It's nothing else to be done. And you're like, oh, well, vendor them and get the money for it. Not worth. It's not worth it. Unless it's like you're vendoring millions of these things, it's worth 2 Meseta a piece. So it just doesn't really make sense as to why this exists in the first place. So honestly, just cut the Meseta cost off of this. It's not worth it. It's not worth it overall for the health of the game. You can definitely put, if you want to have players have to put more time and effort into these things, make it a resource that you don't need to split with other things as well. Make the other resource cost more. That's fine. Players have to go out. They have to farm resources. They do your daily mineral runs. You got to make sure you're doing specific pieces of content and drop these resources for you to upgrade your gear. That is perfectly fine. The Meseta cost ain't it. It is not that expensive. Don't get me wrong. You can farm for literally an hour to 2 hours to get the Meseta that you need. However, that's farming for an hour to 2 hours of money you could have put towards the next fashion that was coming out. And maybe you're free to play. Maybe you're not trying to swipe for that fashion itself. You're trying to build up, right? Maybe you're like me and you want to get, you know, the new dash, the new glide, the new jump. That was 60 mil almost. Like that was about 45 to 50 mil. It was pretty expensive overall. Granted, I scratched, I lucked out. I did farm a ton. I had 26 mil at the start of this. As you can see, I have 1.4 mil now between everything I bought, but that's just something that you have to separate. Isn't worth it. Hopefully I explained that in its entirety of why I feel like that's a change that needs to happen itself overall. And then of course, by lesser extent, the augment transfer system needs to be updated. One other thing to mention, this is kind of like the inverse situation. It's the augment capsule. These up here, I think are perfectly fine. I think these actually work out perfectly fine. But when you get down to some of these ones here with Gigas 4s and Masteries and Dread Keepers and things of that sort, it just doesn't make sense to me that these cost so many materials. Less than the material cost on some of these. Like it's just, I mean, the Guacha will slash this in like half. Realistically speaking, some of these material costs really just don't really make much sense. Ton of these minerals and things like that, unless you're just farming minerals on repeat every single day, it doesn't ever make it a situation where these are actually worth trading up for. So just, I think you should slash the material costs here. It's not really that big of a deal overall, but it would be nice to have a system where we have all these, you know, these things that you can make and you're trading this stuff up to some of the better things overall. Like basically this needs a rebalance at the lower end. The high end, I think it's fine. At the lower end, I think it needs a little bit of a rebalance. So it'd be nice to see this looked at again. Moving on, I actually want to talk about creative spaces because we're kind of throwing in a situation that we have here. Do I want to go with creative space? Yeah, we'll deal with creative spaces next. So next we're going to talk about creative spaces and a change I really feel like would be overall beneficial for a vast majority of the community that's already been tested in a lot of other games as well, because I know there's something that people like to concern themselves about when it comes to creative spaces. Creative spaces look cool. They give you the ability to get your alliance buff, and that's super cool. I love this creative space. It was created for me. However, they're being underutilized. We should effectively be able to do almost everything from our creative space if we want to. Like outside of going into specific zones, like we can't even open the map and teleport out of here. Now, granted, that's probably because of how creative spaces work and things of that sort. But realistically speaking, the ability to queue for quests, the ability to go into the market, the ability to change our classes and just do basic things should be doable from the Alliance creative space specifically. Reason for it is it creates a community-based location for people to come together. Imagine a world, right? Just hold on to this with me. Imagine a world, like roll with me here, where you log into the game, you run out and you do your dailies, right? Let's say you run your dailies or something along those lines, and then you're finished with your dailies and you just jump into your Alliance creative space just to hang out. Maybe you guys have created like a town or maybe like a hall or just like, you know, just a cool place to just chill. And you hang out there and then an urgent quest pops up. Now you can call it, hey, who wants to do the urgent quest? Just in the space, right? Like just saying it in Say Chat. Some people pop up, say something, you invite a couple of your friends around. You grab your buffs, your alliance, you're right there. You already have the alliance buff there. Maybe there's a Ryukar that you can go ahead and eat a food buff at, or maybe there's a food counter you can eat a food buff at, and you're good to go. You queue for the actual urgent, and then you guys jump right into the urgent. How cool would that be? It would take all these creative spaces people put tons and tons of time into and make it so it creates a community-based location. Now, I know there's people out there like, hey, but what about the towns? People are just not going to hang out in towns anymore if you have these creative spaces. That is just factually incorrect. I promise you that's not going to happen. People will still hang out in towns because they want to hang out with other people outside of just their alliance. And I'm not just saying that, hey, this is going to happen. I'm telling you this is going to happen because it quite literally already happens in other games that exist. There are games that do this exact thing already. Final Fantasy is the one I think of immediately, where you have quite literally a house you can purchase and you can hang out, and you're like, oh, well, just if you don't have a house, you go to a town. No, there are plenty of people that have houses, that have free company houses, which is the equivalent of our alliance spaces and things like that, that still hang out in towns all the time because they want to hang out around other people. They congregate in the new zones, the new areas. They check out all these new stuff. And honestly, it just allows people who want to just hang out with their alliance to hang out with their alliance. It gives them a space where they can do all of these things and they can just be chill and have a good time. I think it's something that really is being underutilized overall, and it could be super beneficial. So give us the ability to do a lot more from our creative spaces. Maybe not everything, right? Maybe there's certain things that you can't just do from the creative space, but the ability to do more would be awesome. I know some of you guys are thinking, well, creative spaces don't count as blocks. So like, how are you going to do that? You can already queue for instance-based content across blocks. If you queue for something and it throws you into a block, that's just how it's going to work. Like it already exists. They already do it all the time. Whenever you're in STIA and you queue for something that's an alio, you get thrown into an alio block. When you go into the instance, it can put you in a block. That's not a problem. So definitely something I would love to see change. Now, this next one is kind of like across this whole creative space thing. So it's like maybe one or the other. So it's one of those situations where you kind of have to balance the two. And that's overall instance-based content in this game. I'm gonna throw this out here. Everything that's instance-based in this game should be cross-ship. Realistically speaking, everything. I mean, everything that is instance-based should be cross-ship. Technically speaking, the world, the open world that we talk about, is a bunch of open instances. It's not really an open world. It's not one. It's one transitional, move between one to next. No load screens, which that's great. But realistically speaking, they're instance chunks. When you're going into another zone, there is a zone line. That zone line then kind of teleports you into that instance itself without you having to move. You end up going into that instance on that specific block. So that's still a thing that happens. Now, I'm not going to say the open world has to do this, but all of our instance-based content, our instance-based quests, and honestly, our creative spaces, if we're not going to make it a situation where we can, honestly, let's put it this way. Creative spaces in general should be instance-based. It would be so much cooler if we could actually go to our creative spaces, our friends' creative spaces cross-ship, since these are all instanced anyway, and they're already separated from all the block systems that we have to go through. So if we're not going to make, creative spaces more usable across the entire game, right? Like we can cleave into stuff or whatever from creative spaces, then just make it cross-ship, make it available to everyone. It would be so much cooler if I could just jump into creative spaces of like my other friends. It'd be better for events. It would be better for just variety in general of players to be able to see other things, to be able to hang out with more people. It also kind of leads us into the next issue overall when it comes to games like this, and it's breaking down the overall server barrier. Servers are a blight on MMOs. I understand there's some people that come from old school MMOs. They're like, server community is the best. And you can only play with certain people. You get to learn to meet with those people, and you get to interact with them. I hate to say this, it's a dead concept. It is. Yes, that happens with people that want to do that, because at the time that was a thing, that is how MMO games that's how the player base already worked. It was partial out of necessity, and it was also partial out of want. In a lot of cases, you didn't realize that's what you wanted until it was put in front of you. And granted, a lot of people have had a lot of really great experiences, so they want those other people to have those experiences. But you have to realize that not everyone experiences things the same way. You shouldn't force people into things because you think they're going to have a better time with doing it. You should give them the ability to do that if they want to. That is a choice, not a requirement. And this game already doesn't do that, so it doesn't really matter. So realistically speaking, that's a big way of saying merge the ships. Just merge them. Make a mega server. The biggest problem with these games is the inability to play with your friends. And Final Fantasy XIV is already breaking down the walls where they're going as far as region data center visit, being able to visit other regions. World of Warcraft is breaking down these walls, and they've done sharding for the longest time. And now they're even working on apparently mythic raiding cross server. That's a very big thing. And guilds cross server, also a very big thing. I don't understand why we still have this problem where you can roll on one ship and then you're stuck not being able to play with your friends on a different ship. They're starting to do cross-server content or cross-ship content, which is fantastic, but the best case scenario is everyone being together to begin with. It means you no longer have to worry about these things. And most people are going to server infrastructure. You don't understand that if they merge the servers, everything's going to be like, let's let the people who actually work on servers figure that stuff out. We don't know their server infrastructure. And if some people do know, they're reading some shit online that someone else has posted about. We don't know the actual legitimate, until the devs tell us specifically, hey, this is the reason we don't do this because of this reason. We do not know. Don't make it up. It's not worth it. We can bring solutions, we can bring problems, but we can't like we can't actually just like, oh yeah, this is the issue, like this is how you fix the problem itself, right? We can bring ideas, I'm sorry, not solutions, but they have to actually figure out the proper solutions for the overall issue itself. So I've heard that argument forever, and I've heard the argument in every single game ever. The argument existed in Final Fantasy for the longest time. The arguments existed in plenty of other games, and they've gotten past it eventually. Merge the servers. Realistically speaking, the ability to play with everyone. I mean, like, again, something across one of those things. Merge the servers, cross-ship content, or universal ship for like all of these instance-based things. Like, something along those, like, get players together, get them the ability to play with all of their friends. I would love the ability to play with everyone on every ship without having to worry about gearing 4 different characters. It's insane. I'm just not going to do it. I'll be real. I just don't gear those other characters. I leave them in very basic gear. And I do like very, very minimal content on other ships. Realistically, I just go over there to visit, look around, say hi, check out creative spaces, and then kind of dip. That's my usual thing when it comes to other ships itself. But imagine being able to play with everyone across the game, being able to do events with everyone across the game, queuing for content, and just because you play on a ship that not a lot of people play on, you're able to still queue with everyone across the entire game itself. You don't feel like you're alienated. Having a market that isn't manipulated by 1 or 2 people that the entire game has access to. The market manipulators are going to go crazy because they'll be able to access everyone else, and then everyone else will go crazy because they'll be able to smash down the market manipulators. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's overall just better for the health of the game if everyone had access to something like this. Now, there are the purists out there that believe that server boundaries are what makes communities great. And you know what? You're more than welcome to think that way. I think it's bad for the health of the game overall. I think it's a terrible thing to have for the health of the game. I think it's much better if everyone has access to playing with everybody under all circumstances, and there are tons of parties available for people to play. We have shown that they can increase block counts. They can increase all types of things. It's something that can be done. I think it'd be a better overall choice. As far as the legitimacy, or not legitimacy, I'm sorry, the logistics of how they would do that, I would leave it up to the dev team and server teams and things of that sort to tell us exactly how or why they could or couldn't, or what they can do versus what they can't do. But a lot of games have already done this, and they've done it very well, and they're still working on it. So I don't think there's a world that we could even say that there's like, this is impossible. We'll figure it out. But that's mostly of what I kind of thought about would be best overall for the game itself. I'm curious what you guys would like to see in the comments below. And I mean, I have to give the obligatory, of course, you know, respect to people's opinions. Everyone has different opinions of the situation itself. We're looking at best overall for the health of the game. Everyone likes to do the whole more content, but everything is content. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not content. Something I have to say, because people just don't understand. It's crazy when like, oh, I had appreciated content instead of this. I'm like, this is content, just not the content you wanted. So, you know, I would love to see what you guys have to think. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way to the end. Like, if you guys enjoyed the video, so if you want to keep up with more, appreciate the channel members. You guys are fantastic. We'll get back to more of these discussion videos kind of in the mix, along with some more of our combat or content-based videos. Content, it's all content. I see, even I'm falling into it. Anyway, thanks, channel members. Take care, my friends. Peace out.